It is the opinion of the chair and staff that the items on today's agenda constitute essential business of this body, and that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Are there any objections? I'll also note that today's meeting is being live streamed by Metro ITS on Metro Network 2. So at this time, committee members, please let us know if you're on this call. Margaret Bam?
Here.
There you are. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dan Hogan?
I'm here. Good morning.
Anna Page? Okay. I'm not sure if Anna's going to be on this morning, but we will proceed. We also have some advisory committee members on the call. We have Nancy Van Ree, Ian Eyre, and Scott Ramsey. And with procurement, we have Michelle Lane and Terry Ray. So thanks to all of you for taking the time to be with us this morning. The first item on the agenda is considerations of the minutes from October 14th, 2020 meeting. You should have received the minutes on Friday from that meeting. And hopefully you've had an opportunity to review. Are there any questions or comments?
I move approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, the motion has been moved and approved. Is there any discussion? Not all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposers, nay. Okay, the minutes have been approved. We just approved the minutes, but before we get into our discussion today, I thought a quick summary would be helpful for everyone. At the October meeting, the Sports Authority, at the recommendation of this committee, voted to hire a consultant to help with next steps as outlined in the CAA ICON report. The committee noted that priorities could be reordered to meet the committee's objectives. The committee decided that a market community survey should be completed separately. And we also talked about how to procure phase 2, what that would look like in large part because it will be based on cost and the bids we receive due to Metro's delegated purchasing authority. So in late November, the staff did send out invitations to bid, and the staff received responses from 3 of them: CAA ICON, Sports Value Consulting, Conventions and Sports Leisure. The length of the submissions and the information provided varies greatly, but I think we want to first discuss the costs and proposed fees associated with this, and I think that will be helpful in determining how we move forward. I think if you look at the screen, we can see those responses. It's a little small. You may have to make it larger on your screen. But I think that's where we want to begin our conversations. We have we want to talk about the survey, but really we want to have some discussion about what the best way to approach moving forward would be. So I'll entertain any comments from the board, the committee. And if you all are still thinking, Margaret Darby, if you're on the call, we welcome you also to weigh in on what it looks like from where you are sitting.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Kathy, Chair Bender. This is Margaret Darby. I have had an opportunity to look through the bids that we received, and I will, of course, invite Michelle Lane or Terry Ray to correct anything about our purchasing requirements that I'm about to say. So after looking through these, it would appear that the total value of any of these bids would exceed that $25,000 delegated limit that we have under the delegated authority allowed under the procurement regulations. So I know that the fees appear to come in under that, well, some of them do appear to come in under that $25,000 mark. But then when you add in the total cost of the contract, you also will be looking at the expenses for the firms that have made the bids. And I only saw this, or only like stood out in one of the bids that was submitted. I think it was from the CSL, where they estimated what some of those expenses would be, not the travel expenses and those types of things, but the expenses for holding the focus groups and things of that nature. And it looks like it would come out to be somewhere between, or even more than, somewhere between $8,000 to $10,000 or even more on top of the fees that were charged. One other thing that I want to remind the committee about that we have discussed before, and again, I invite our experts from procurement and our purchasing agent to correct me if I'm wrong, but the procurement regulations and the Metro Code that governs procurement, it's pretty clear in there that splitting a procurement is disfavored. And so in order to stay underneath that $25,000 mark, that is disfavored. So it concerns me a bit when the two lowest bids that we received for any of the separate services both come from the same firm. So CSL submitted a bid of $22,000. This is excluding the cost issue that I just mentioned, or the expenses issue I just mentioned. But the market survey from CSL was bid in at $22,500, and the economic and fiscal impact analysis was at $10,000. Both of those, for each one of these elements that was put out for quotation, those bids are the lowest of all of them. So they come in from one firm, which if we were to separate them out, I think really flies in the face of that the prohibition against splitting the bids in order to stay under that amount. So all of that said, after having seen the bids that have come in, it seems as if a more robust procurement process could be warranted. And again, I invite Michelle or Terry to step in and tell me or explain things further than what I've just
Thank you,
provided.
Margaret. Michelle, would you like to?
Yes. Thank you so much for recognizing me. I completely concur with Margaret. The spirit of the delegated purchasing, regulations is such that the value of your need, your related need, would be less than $25,000. So in so much as, all of the elements necessary, to satisfy the need of the authority in aggregate exceed the $25,000, I think to consider use of delegated purchasing to accomplish this would be in violation of those regulations.
Thank you. Any other comments? And then I would like to hear from the board. I think we have received some good guidance, but as a committee, we do want to find the most appropriate solution to move forward. And so you may have some questions or thoughts that might have not been addressed. So Margaret or Dan?
I'm happy to go first, Dan. That's okay with you.
Sure.
One of the reasons we anticipated the legal advice and the procurement advice that we just received, one of the reasons we wanted to separate out is that we're particularly interested in a market analysis or an economic analysis. And going through during this time of going ahead and being able to do one of those. So it was anticipated that we might get this advice, but we didn't know what the figures would be. When I look at the figures, no entity, when we're looking at a market survey, comes in under $25,000 because they all say they will also include expenses. So we don't see an ability to do a market survey without violating procurement, which is what we've known all along. The one question is about the economic impact, because that amount is low, what the actual expenses would be for that. Because I don't know if there's as many expenses that are involved versus maybe doing focus groups and that kind of thing. So I do, in looking at this, have maybe some questions about that. I don't think anyone in the Sports Authority has ever tried to not be with the spirit of what procurement is or try to split procurement. We've been very conscious of these rules and regulations and have tried to do what we could within the spirit to push this initiative along. So all of that is to say, this bid for the economic impact study, which I think is important from CSL, is from a vendor that we didn't have before, so we would not look like we're trying to package up and double dip for the same or amend the previous contract. I am. I'm also wondering. I think these bids came in high for the strategic planning stage of this, and I'm not sure that we, as a sports authority, even if we make a recommendation to go out to procurement, looking at what these values are, I'm not sure that's what we're going to be looking for, because I'm not sure that's something that we as a sports authority want to pay that kind of money for. So I have to say that looking at these bids, I'm more focused on the market surveys and the economic impact surveys. But Dan and Kathy, I would be interested in your thoughts if and when we go out to procurement, what is it we should be asking for? And then I also would like to hear from Monica about her thoughts about what these bids were, the money, and what we have as a sports authority. If we go out to bid, what are we asking for? What can we afford? So why don't we start with you, Monica? What can we afford?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think, to be perfectly honest, and this is not going to surprise anybody, we do not have a lot of discretionary funding. I think that we are, we're trying to be extremely conservative. We're trying to be very wise with how we use our money at this point, understanding that we still are not generating much in terms of, ticket tax revenue and seat use revenue and some of these things. And we want to make sure that, our first and our priority is always to make sure that we can meet our debt obligations. So saying that, or having said that, I think that we don't have a lot of money. And so the strategic plan, in my opinion, I think that CAA Icon provided us with a lot of very solid and helpful information. I think that we can do what we need to do to move forward without another one. And my recommendation would be to focus on the market survey and the economic fiscal analysis. In terms of a dollar amount, I think that if we're looking at at this point, I think that we could, $50,000, we can probably, I think we could cover that. But at this point, there's still a lot of unknowns. I would feel more comfortable. I think one of the other good things in going through the procurement process is it will give us, I think another 6 months so that we can see where we are. And I think we'll be in an even stronger position to expend funds.
Okay. Margaret, from where I sit, I definitely agree with you about the strategic plan bids coming in higher than what I anticipated. I think all of us have prohibition against the splitting issue front of mind. But given the report that we received, I concur with Monica from CAA ICON. I think that we have great groundwork and strategic planning. I think we could move away from that and focus on the market survey and the economic fiscal analysis. In terms of what we asked for, I think I would be interested in having the ability, maybe we could receive both of those from one vendor, maybe not, once we start to really break down the intangibles that they bring to the table, but it would give us that ability if indeed we decided to go that way. The $10,000 from CSL is a low number. I was a little concerned that they thought they could do it in 2 weeks. I thought that was a short amount of time. Didn't know how in-depth it might be, but still open to discussions around that. But I would like for us to move forward through the, normal procurement process so that we don't have to maybe settle for the cheapest or the least expensive. So those are my thoughts.
Madam Chair, this is Dan Hogan. I'd like to make a few comments, if I may.
Please, thank you.
I want to echo certainly some of the sentiments that I think Margaret Bem was expressing in so much as I don't have any intention of recommending that we fly in the face of established procurement protocols, but I do view these projects singularly. I think that it is our responsibility, most likely, to do the financial and economic analysis before we do anything else. And that, as a standalone project, could determine whether or not we go forward in any way. And so I don't see this organization as recommending moving forward on that project in particular as trying to do an end around. But I hear what Kathy, what you were saying about the process. I am a little ignorant as to what the regular procurement process is, should it exceed 25,000. So I would like to hear from someone on the call, if you don't mind hand-holding me a little bit through what the process would be, how long that would take. But I guess in summary, speaking personally, I understand that we are in a really uncertain time as an organization simply because we haven't sold any tickets in quite a while to any of our venues. But with an effort like this, I think it's incumbent upon us to find a way to keep these projects alive, even in tough times like this. So it is my aspiration that this project continue moving, and I don't feel like recommending the economic analysis should we get some positive recommendations from clearly the Nashville clientele that they've already worked with. I would be excited to move forward with something like that.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So, Michelle, would you or Terry care to walk us through the process?
Yes, thank you so much. We're happy to kind of give you a brief overview of the process. And typically, the way that it works out is that we're going to receive, a specific request in this instance related to the items that are on your screen from what we call the proponent department. which would be the Sports Authority. We would work with the identified person or persons to develop a scope of work and to ensure that we have solicitation requirements established that allow us to maximize competition and increase the likelihood that, the authority would receive qualified bids. We want to make sure that we have good detail in that scope of work that allow for all potential offers to understand what Metro's requirements are, the Sports Authority's requirements are, so that they can put together, it would be information that would really be instructive to the formulation of a quality response. The regulations require that at a minimum, once we've developed the solicitation and the contact person for the authority has signed off on that solicitation scope, that it be on the street for no less than 14 days, unless the purchasing agent makes a determination that, there are conditions that warrant that it be on the street for less than that. It would be issued, via our iProcurement system, and responses would be submitted in the iProcurement system as well. Part of the evaluation for the responses typically would include cost, of course, but it would include other evaluation criteria that have been established in that solicitation in consultation with the Sports Authority. So to the point I believe that Ms. Bam made about, what we're looking for, we would detail that very clearly in the scope of service section of the solicitation. And then we would identify very clearly for the offers how they're going to be evaluated, what criteria will be used to determine the quality of their response. Typically, from start to finish, we can get the process done in about 3 to 4 months. If it takes, if we need to kind of fast track it, and we've been doing quite a bit of that lately, then we're able to do that as well. We would just simply have to indicate why this is an emergency, as I will note that, we have been working very closely with the mayor's office and some of our other departments who are providing, direct response to COVID, as well as to the more recent the blast that occurred on Christmas Day. So some of those projects, of course, they're going to take priority. But I don't see why we wouldn't be able to get this done for you within that time frame.
So you're saying that from starting today, that it would take 3 to 4 months?
I'm saying that from the time that we receive the requisition,
okay,
we complete the solicitation process. Once it's completed and we evaluate it, it is very strongly dependent also, we see this quite a bit, on the availability of your evaluation committee to review the responses, for us to finalize that process, and then to negotiate a contract and get to a completed contract.
Hi, this is Kim Adkins. I have a couple questions and comments, if appropriate, Chair Bender.
Okay, yes. Is this Madam Chair?
Yes, hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us all together this morning. So am I understanding, is it, and I guess this question's for Michelle, is it the feel of this body of that the strategic plan portion is maybe not necessary as we move forward, and it would be the focus of any type of solicitation would be limited to the market survey and the fiscal analysis, and try and work within the scope of budget that Monica shared is something that we could afford? Is that my understanding on kind of next steps, if I'm hearing this correctly? Michelle, is that correct?
I don't know that I'm necessarily positioned to answer that question. I'm not 100% sure of the items that I'm seeing here, the various components, the strategic plan, the market survey, the economic and fiscal analysis. I don't know what's been done, if there's anything that has been done to date.
But your office would work with the body to set the parameters moving forward if we went towards a bid process. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And what you could do is establish the request for proposals in such a way that each one of these elements, of course, they would provide you with a detailed proposal for each of these elements, but you can also specify to them that it's contingent upon, funding availability, and that every single one of them may not be executed. We've had some other recent solicitations where we've done that kind of thing. So to the extent that you want to go ahead and understand what the market will yield for you in terms of potential offers who can respond and provide you with a proposal on all of these, and then you can make a determination about whether or not you want to move forward with the next element. As a body, you come to some understanding of what's in the best interest. You would then still have a vendor whose offer you have evaluated and determined would potentially be, best suited for it. Now, if any of these are dependent on the other, meaning what you learn from one will kind of dictate the way you proceed with the other, then I think that you're probably in a position to kind of look at a different approach on it. And then, some of what I think Ms. Bim, noted earlier may come into play if it's not in your interest or you're not interested in, having responses from the same vendor for all of these elements.
Thank you, Michelle. That's helpful. Just to have a little clarity in the process. Mm-hmm. I think my personal opinion is I know we're in fragile times, but I also believe we're in really an opportunistic time for women's professional sports here in Nashville, given where we are and the opportunities we have to go. And I'm excited just to be on this call and to learn more about this process, and certainly support moving this ball down the field. So that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Madam Chair.
Kathy, can I kind of weigh in again?
Please.
This is also helpful, and I think in listening to everybody's comments and listening to Dan's and Kathy's comments, and it seems to me that if we want to do a market survey, we need to go out to procurement, given what we've seen here. Mm-hmm. And we're down to the question of whether or not we can do an economic impact survey for less than $25,000. And I really am, there are two things that I'm thinking about. One is I think it's important, Kathy, what you said about are we not really knowing what we're getting, because in this process we would need to take the lowest bid, obviously, and the lowest bid is within our framework.
Yeah.
And the time period, I'm struck with that. I don't know if we can really tell in the proposal what we're getting. I don't know if we've really explored that, up to this point and thinking about it. And I don't know if taking longer is something they would do within, or, we can negotiate to make sure that we're getting what we think. And if we don't, we go out to bid at that. One thing I want to do is, if we recommend that we go ahead and go out for procurement on the market analysis, but we see what we're going to get on this economic impact study, and if we could go ahead and start that, or if the timing's right now, or whatever, just have some conversations. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure if we were going in that direction that we have a comfort level from our lawyer and from procurement that we are not trying to split some kind of procurement proposal in some kind of inappropriate way, not going along with the spirit of procurement. I myself personally think that this is what we are anticipating, that we would separate out these issues. So if we got to this place, we could pick one if it was the lowest one and we were comfortable with it. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this bid yet, but I don't know if I want to give it up and not explore it. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, I think that's kind of where we are. Dan, what are you thinking?
Well, it did sound to me like the attorneys on the call had a dimmer view of our opportunity to break this out. If we're going to go to procurement, for one, it might be more expeditious to go to procurement for both a market and an economic fiscal survey.
Yeah, I see that.
But I think we are unanimous in our sentiment that we want to find a way to do this, and similarly, we want to find a way to do this according to the rules. And it seems to me that that's the only way to do it within the boundaries as they've been expressed.
Kathy,
I wanted to say also, I'm sorry, Margaret.
Yeah, go ahead, because I certainly want to hear what you want to say.
I think that, the most important thing is that we hire the firm that can best help us meet our objective of securing a professional franchise. And so while we have the opportunity, it would appear to hire CSL, and they would be within our delegated purchasing authority for the economic and fiscal analysis. It is a short time. I'm not sure. 2 weeks seems very short to me. It may be because they are so familiar with the Nashville market if you look at that list of partial experience. But however, the cost is important, but it's not always the most important thing. And I just want to make sure that our focus is on hiring the firm that is going to be the most helpful. And, whether there is some, look at the notes and CAA Icon who said, they understood, and they've been, I don't know if they're on this call today, but they've been with us, throughout this process, and they understood that we were looking at some type of split or breaking it apart. And, and of course, they've encouraged us to not just for their benefit, but just to look at keeping it together just for timing. And I don't know if they think there's some type of synergy there. But I just want to make sure that we are, that we're not being short-sighted in any way because of money, and that we are, that we're going to hire the firm that is going to provide the most value. And, I think Michelle and Terry, and we've, as a board, we've been through the procurement process so much. And so I think there's some real benefits there in going through the formal RFP process, as opposed to using our purchasing authority for what is essentially, it's a service and not a good.
Monica, this is Dan. I think you bring up a very good point that they've demonstrated here that they've got some familiarity with this market. They also note in their longer summary that they've done some work for the Titans. Is there an opportunity for us to seek out some of their past clientele and just ask in terms of reference what their experience was? That would seem a very valuable next step. I'd like to know, because to be perfectly honest, sometimes the lowest price is, it may seem too good to be true, but it might also be an apt option for us. So I would like to propose that whomever is best suited to connect with Vanderbilt, Bridgestone, Nashville MLS, and just seek out some references about this group. I'd be very interested to read them.
So this is Kathy. Margaret, you had asked me to kind of weigh in, and one thing I love about this committee is the spirit that we all have about moving forward and being excited about bringing women's professional sports to Nashville. So I think we're definitely all on the same page there. And so, Dan, I appreciate your comments about finding a way, even in difficult times. I mean, I wrote that down. I really like it. And I think you're exactly right. I think that's the tough part about where we are. I think there's so much uncertainty that makes our next move even more difficult. I agree with you, Margaret, on moving forward with the market survey to procurement. Initially, I agreed with, well, and I do agree, I still agree with Dan's idea around why not send both of the economic fiscal analysis to procurement as well. My idea around keeping the dial moving and working, I feel like that is a part of the process. I don't think we're not moving the dial forward while going through that process. I think it's a part of the process. We're looking at 120 days. 120 days out is March, April. I don't think much changed around the economy and around the pandemic by April, May of this year. I still think that we'll still be in a time of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns. I am not necessarily opposed, Dan, to learning more about CSL. I don't know if we necessarily have the expertise within us to determine that they are still the most viable candidate, even if we find out that they've done well. So I don't know how we would come to that decision around them. I'm happy if we want to spend more time picking that apart. But I definitely feel that procurement is a reasonable move forward on both of the issues. Comment? Hello?
Oh,
Sorry, I thought I lost you guys.
Kathy, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay, this is Emmett Wynn. I just have one question. What is the driving point? Is it the time element that we're placing at the top of our list, or are we trying to keep in mind the uncertainty of our environment right now? You were mentioning the COVID, we were mentioning the economy. What is the driving force?
Well, I think, and I'll just give it my best shot. I think that what's driving it is the fact that we feel that it is a critical piece of the overall sporting venues for the city of Nashville. We think that professional women's sports is important. We think that the timing of having access to a team is critical. We don't know, part of the analysis will share information that will help us in determining what types of teams are open, when they're open, what criteria is necessary. I think COVID is just on the plate because, and it's going to be on our plate. So what we don't want to do is not be prepared. We will come through that, but we want to be working towards an end throughout that process, because that's definitely an unknown. So I think money's important, and I think timing's important as well. Margaret, Dan?
yeah. I think that's such a good question, Emma, and I agree with Kathy. I also think that just thinking about 3 or 4 months after procurement gets the information from us, then we contract and part of that time period, and then the work has to be done. We are talking about, whether you hire at least one aspect of this to go ahead and get more information to be ready now, or you wait half a year to get the information. And so that's what's going on in my mind. And, we first hired our other consultant last year, and was it April? Maybe March. So we're 10 months later. So I think that we need to keep in mind what we can do and what we can't do with procurement. And I think we've done that. But I also think we want to make sure that we're ready if we get an opportunity to have the information that's needed. So I don't know if that was a great example or answer, but I think it seems to me we need to decide whether we're going to send both to procurement or take another look at a harder look, as Dan suggests, maybe call another meeting, but maybe not wait a month to do that, so that they can both go together, or we make a final recommendation. I don't know. You know, I think there are good arguments both ways. So I understand the need to just put them together and see what we get and get the process moving instead of continuing to talk about it. So I'm leaning more moving them together and let's get going.
Margaret, this is Dan. I intuited from what Kathy said that was her inclination. I'm hearing that you agree with that. I agree with that. I think that would be the logical next step. Not to run completely counter to what I suggested earlier about doing the economic analysis. I still think there is, as you mentioned, a good argument for a standalone effort there. But I do think, in an attempt to make everybody comfortable that we are abiding within the rules, I would be ready to make that motion, Madam Chair, if that was where you'd like to go with this.
I'm ready. Madam Chair's ready.
All right.
If I can chime in just a minute, this is Councilmember Nancy Van Rees.
Yes.
I had my hand raised. I just wanted to
I'm sorry.
make a comment.
We missed you. Please feel
Well,
free.
that's fine. Hi, thank you, everybody, for your due diligence. And I wanted just to chime in that, yes, things move slowly anytime there's a .gov behind it. So I think that the sooner that you can understand the direction you're going, the faster you can get those train tracks laid. As a council member, I can speak on behalf of the procurement process being vital long-term, 6 months, a year from now, whenever this comes before conversations that involve more of the public, more government input. The fact that from the beginning that there was a procurement process in place, that there was a national-based search, and that all equitable opportunities were provided is going to be vital to you in the long run. And I just wanted to put those 2 cents in. I feel like you're about to go ahead and agree with me, but I wanted to make sure and for the record say that I think that it is absolutely appropriate to get as many ideas on the table as we can.
Thank you for those comments. They are definitely helpful in us continuing to move forward in our thoughts. So with that, I think, Dan, you were about to make a motion?
I was, but I see that Michelle Lane has her hand raised. I don't know if there's some outstanding detail we need to address.
I see Michelle's hand now. I've got to pay attention. Michelle, are you there?
Yes, thank you. I had, just a comment a little while back as there was conversation about the discussions with the various vendors. I just wanted to note, and I don't want to jump the gun, so forgive me if I'm doing that, but if there is a decision, that you're going to move this to procurement, our expectation would certainly be that all of those communications with any of these and any other potential offers would cease in an effort to protect the integrity of the process.
Okay. Monica?
No, I appreciate that, Michelle, and also Council Lady Van Rees, your comments as well. And access is always important, and so maybe procurement can briefly speak to this. These are the firms that responded to just a bid or a bid invitation that we put out. How will we potentially be able to expand our candidate pool or the proposals that we receive? Is that something that procurement can help us with, identifying other consultants?
Sure. I'll speak to it, and then I would defer also to Ms. Ray to speak to it. But once you provide us with the detail that will enable us to develop the solicitation for you, we are going to assign it the most appropriate commodity, what we call commodity codes. They're business codes, and we have 20,000 plus vendors in a variety of different categories that are registered and interested in doing business with the city. And they identify their service or product provision using those codes. So when we determine which one is in the best interest of this solicitation by the way of description, then we're going to push it out to all of those vendors who are registered. Not every one of them will be, capable of providing, a quality response, but it will go out. If you all are aware of other offers that are not currently registered, we often ask that question in an effort to, get them registered and to ensure that they are aware of the solicitation that we have available for and open for offers. Terry, I don't know if you want to add a little more to that. Our procurement resource group does a lot of that specific vendor sourcing piece to make sure that we have available offers who can bid on some of these RFPs.
Thank you, Michelle. And what Michelle has stated is correct. And we can also do research to see who else is out there and reach out to them as well and get them registered and provide guidance. And the team is there to provide guidance on how to submit and making sure they have access to the system and that their profiles are up to date to receive the notifications. So we're there to provide every assistance we can and to expand that vendor pool. So there is more participation in the solicitation.
Okay, thank you. So Dan and Margaret, does that change anything that you all are thinking about the next move?
No, I would just like to say before Dan makes his motion that thank you, Councilmember Nancy Van Rees. You were doing exactly what an advisory committee member is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And it was very much appreciated. Thank you very much. Dan?
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. But if there's no further discussion, I would like to make a motion that we move to procurement for both a market survey and an economic financial analysis for our women's pro sports effort.
I'd like to second that motion. And I'm wondering, I don't know if we need to put this in the motion, but I think, Dan, I'm speaking for you, that we don't have to necessarily hire one firm to do both. It could be separated out, depending on the proposal, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That would be my sentiment.
Friendly amendment, okay. So there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposers, nay. Motion carries. Thank you all for a very great discussion this morning. I think this is what our committee work is about, and I think we are moving the dial. I think that agreeing to going through the process, I certainly appreciate Council Lady Nancy's comments around us not having to have conversations about this at a later date, that we're going through all the initial steps and that everyone's on board. I think that will serve to benefit us long term. So I really appreciate the dialogue and the input this morning. And are there any other comments?
No, thank you for a great meeting, Kathy. Good job.
Thank you very much. And so full board meeting begins at 10:30. So if there's no other business, I'd entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
I want to say also, if for anyone who's listening, we're going to move to Metro Nashville 1 at 10:30. So please join us over there.
Okay.